Good afternoon, everyone, now that I've got your attention. I thank you for coming to this, one of the last Praxis Oral conference sessions. I hope you've had a good conference so far. We've got a really exciting lineup for you today. I think possibly this is one of the best conference sessions that's going to take place, so just picking them up now. It's entitled Tales from the Front Line, and that's really what it's all about. We've got 3 examples of each of our speakers who will share their KE journey with you, showcasing their unique approaches to how they enhance knowledge exchange in their own institutions, and being very honest about the challenges that they faced along the way, but also the next steps. So they're case study presentations, and then we're going to have a Q&A after that. So please write down your questions or think them up in advance and be ready to ask some questions to our panel at the end. I'll introduce them all now. We're going to start with Adnan Bayyat, who is a Knowledge Exchange Fellow at the University of Salford, and then Batra-Penny, who's Head of Enterprise and Innovation at St George's University in London, and finally Christina Blakey, who's Head of Knowledge Exchange at Edgehill University. So Adnan, would you like to come up? Thanks.
Hi everyone, it's so nice to see such a full room. I'm Adnan Bayyat, Knowledge Exchange Fellow for the University of Salford Business School. And I'm kind of talking about cultural change and how that's come about throughout our institution. The University of Salford affirmed its commitment to knowledge exchange by using high funding to instate 4 knowledge exchange fellows one each across its schools. And we were tasked with looking for specific projects to develop and to kind of commercialize, to try and understand the research that's going on in each individual school. And so I thought, how am I going to start? Where am I going to start? I'm new to this. It's a 2-year fixed-term contract. Where do you start? So, of course, you know, the prerequisites of knowledge exchange, what are they? We all know that contexts differ, so we couldn't really kind of liaise with each other and say, what do we do as a blanket uniform approach? And so I asked myself these questions, you know, kind of the foundation elements are always the same, of course. It revolves around culture, people, and environment. But the question that I was asking, was, but how? How do we do this? How do we understand the local ecosystem? How do we build trust and relationships? How do we effectively communicate and translate that knowledge and that experience that sits within each of our respective schools? Capacity building and motivating staff, really, to come on board the KE journey. So I developed a knowledge mapping methodology, and it's really bespoke to the context. I wanted to get buy-in from staff. I heard stories of kind of siloed practice, people not really engaging, and how am I kind of new to the whole context going to bring people together? In this mapping methodology, it's fundamentally a relational approach, and it comprises of sitting with each academic for about an hour and talking to them about their interests, meeting them where they are, rather than actually just saying kind of in a corridor, what is the research that you're doing, or sending them a blanket survey to say, oh, just fill out the survey and tell me what your research interests are. And as you can see here, it was a Socratic interview, so we sit together and we really critically reflect on their research interests. So you can see, oh, you can't really see, but from the map here, there's a map schemas to it. You can see there's a context-focused problem and solution, and there's a set of questions that I've developed with this process that I go through to tease out information. We start off with a general kind of blanket idea of where they sit in terms of their discipline or the research context. And then we narrow it down, we work down each column to say, well, what is the focus specifically that you're looking at here? And what are the problem statements that you might be seeking to address through your research or previous projects or future projects? And then that leads on to the solution. What are you proposing as a result to that? The solutions are actually a key area of how you then look at ideas to commercialize. That's where you find the potential once you've gone through this. A lot of academics tend to have that information in their heads and they say, well, okay, I'll think about it when I've got time because of workload problems. This actually carves out that space to sit together and say, okay, what is my research interest and how am I going to commercialize that? So it's developing a commercial mindset. It's developing a culture that actually thinks these people really care for me. They're not just looking to exploit my knowledge. They're not trying to kind of undermine the integrity of my research. They're actually looking for it to have value and impact. So, as you can see here, so it's a one-page profile that captures a holistic view of colleagues' research interests, areas of expertise, and ontologies. You can see from the map, if you met a colleague in a corridor, you might maximum say, oh, what is your research interest? You'll get 1 or 2 words from them. But this gives you the person in the round. You're able then to kind of, I can signpost people, I can send that to anybody across the institution and say, this is the person and this is what they do. So if we go to 3, I'm collating all of these key phrases into an index that then will be able to kind of signpost, and people will be able to access it via a digital interface that we're also in the process of developing. I think an important point to that is, I mean, as we've implemented this, what I've noticed is comms and people across the institution, our centres, directly get in touch with me and say, well, Adnan, we need expertise in this area. Business development come to me and say, Adnan, have we got expertise in this area? And I'm able to signpost them directly and immediately. Sorry, I'll move on. I just wanted to show you the inter and interdisciplinary collaborations that it brings about. So these 2 colleagues are in finance. We can see that one is in global finance, the other one's community finance. We're able to bring them into dialogue. And what came out of this was that both colleagues had identified the absence of financial literacy. And from that, then we can develop CPD around that and in commercial ideas, really. And that's the intra. So the interdisciplinary, the colleague to the right is in marketing, the other is in HR, yet both are working on forms of capital. And we can bring those together to strengthen bids. So, for example, one of them has substantial publications in that area, while the other one has practical, experiential kind of experience. And I'm able to bring these together to strengthen our bids. The prototype, the digital interface that people will be able to access this knowledge through this is a prototype that we're developing at the moment. You'll be able to type in the academic's name or the discipline area or any kind of key phrase that you might hear. I forgot to mention earlier, actually, during the interview, what happens is, as you're asking the questions, you're able to do the translation piece right in that interview, because the academics will speak very technically about what they do, and you're able to say, well, what is it that I'm looking for in industry for me to broker that relationship? And yeah, so that translation piece happens there. Back to this interface will be able to curate, once you've put the adjacent terms or the relative terms in there, a set of maps that are relevant to you. It'll point out the interdisciplinary matches, but also the intradisciplinary matches. I'm writing a paper about this, and I conducted a survey, and I just picked out, because this is about cultural change, I picked out some some testimonials from the academics. So in your opinion, what impact has the mapping had on the school's research culture? I think the main theme that comes out of here is the empowerment of this methodology. It's how it's enabled people to come together and really believe that they're capable and that the institution believes in them. As you can see, so I've almost mapped the entire school. At the moment, there's 89 that I've mapped, and then how many? 42 responded to the survey, and these were just to give you a glimpse of it all. Ta-da, that's it. Thank you so much. I got through it.
Thank you, Adnan. And now, Ambi.
Okay. Can you hear me? I haven't unplugged myself. All right, great. Okay, so I'm Batra-Penny, and I'm going to be telling you a tale today about it's a tale about being in the right place at the right time and the power of community. The main character in this tale is St. George's, University of London. It's a small specialist institution based in South London. So let me set the scene. One of the most common things that people say to me when I tell them about my work is that they've heard of St. George's Hospital, but very few people know that there's a university based on the same site. We're unique in that we're located within the hospital, and we specialise only in healthcare and medicine, and we're the only university of its kind in the UK. So the hospital itself moved from Hyde Park Corner in central London to Tooting in 1980. And for those familiar with South London, you'll recognise the great advantage that move gave us. The hospital and medical school is situated in one of the most diverse areas of London, with communities that tend to stay close to home. A high proportion of our students are local to South London and to that area. So our partnership with the hospital goes beyond strategic. We cohabit the site, we have a joint research institute, academic clinicians are a norm on our corridors, our leaders sit on opposite boards, we have a joint leadership committee, and most importantly, for us at least, we have a joint office for research and enterprise. So within this very complex and unique landscape, I lead the enterprise and innovation team. We sit within the Joint Directorate for Research and Enterprise, so we support knowledge exchange and innovation across the university and the trust, the NHS Trust. So we are a team of 4 FTE supporting, on the university side, 440 academics and over 5,000 students, and on the trust side, around 200 clinical researchers. So we're a small team working in 2 very big organisations with big research going on. And like most people in this room, our team has historically focused on this classic technology transfer cycle from discovery through to commercialisation and income, something that we're all very familiar with in this room. Okay, so that sets the scene now. Let's come on to the story. I joined George's in 2020, and COVID had understandably stalled all of the sort of innovation activity within the trust. They had a lot more important things to be doing. But research within the university actually ramped up. There was a lot of COVID research going on, a lot of clinical trials happening. But whilst the sector had moved on in terms of KE, George's was lagging behind a little bit. And you would think that given the focus on medical research and health research, we'd have novel IP coming out of our ears. But the reality was that when I joined, the pipeline of IP was surprisingly weak and the spin-out portfolio similarly not very lively. And there are various reasons for this that I won't go into today, but needless to say, previous heads of departments, far cleverer than me, and some of you that might be in this room, had to grow this pipe, had tried to grow this pipeline with little long-term success. So something had to change, and fortuitously, my joining George's coincided nicely with the launch of the KE Concordat and then subsequently the first KEF. And as Amanda said yesterday morning, what this did was it really forced our senior leadership to sit up and listen to what I had to say and to actually pay attention. And so as part of the development year, we undertook an internal review, which identified 3 key challenges. The first was that our strategy, our leadership, our academics were all focused on this classic technology transfer model with little to no understanding of KE as a wider concept. The second was that, at least on the innovation front, we had quite limited engagement with the trust, partly because of COVID, but also before that, there just wasn't a huge amount of interaction on innovation and enterprise front. And thirdly, knowledge exchange, like with many other smaller organisations, just didn't form part of the overarching strategy at all. It wasn't a priority for the organisation. And as such, there were no strategic objectives, there was no governance, and there was no motivation for anyone to undertake knowledge exchange activity. But along with identifying these challenges, the review also allowed us to identify some key opportunities. And firstly, it really reinforced that value of engaging with industry, and in particular, engaging with health-focused SMEs. This sounds really obvious, but it moved us away from this model where the focus was on commercializing homegrown IP to a model where we used our existing resources, our expertise and our facilities to support industry partners who in turn offer us access to non-traditional routes of funding like KTP, Innovate UK, which goes back into funding discovery research. And then our second opportunity was one that I alluded to earlier, which was in our local community. And again, we were in the right time at the right place to join the Business Innovation and Growth Partnership in South London, Big South London, which was just ramping up its activity. And this brought together all of the education institutions, colleges, borough councils, local partners, businesses in the area to support economic growth. So taking all of this into consideration, we wrote a strategy that focused on building our offering on partnerships, focusing on our partnerships and the community around us, and on strengthening our value, our sense of value through partnership. So in 2022, we implemented this strategy through the Open for Business initiative. And this included a number of small pump priming type grants like SME innovation vouchers to do that first engagement with industry. It also included our partnership with the Big South London, which positioned us as the key healthcare partner on major regional collaborative bids, like the CCF bids. And over that period, we also developed a commercial offering of specialist facilities, and we opened a biological resource facility earlier this year. And we've also built some purpose-built labs which can be rented out by SME partners. So in 2023, this is the bit I'm most proud about, because I'm sure many colleagues in the room will recognize how hard this is. We successfully maneuvered knowledge exchange into the strategic vision for the university. And it now sits strongly as the third pillar of activity alongside research and teaching. So this refocus of our energy and our budget has really paid off. Our income has grown quite significantly over the last 3 years. Our income from industry-initiated projects, so that's fee-for-service, consultancy, those types of projects, reached 4 million last year, which had been just over 2 million in 2019-20. We generated over 1 million from use of facilities and equipment last year, whilst also actually managing to grow our spin-out and licensing portfolio. So these figures put us amongst the top 20% of UK universities for working with business, research partnerships, and even IP commercialization, which was a bit of a surprise, and I'll talk about later. So continuing this theme of being in the right place in the right time, we have made the most of the Regional Innovation Grant, which we got last year, and we've created a physical home for all of this activity on the St. George's site, the Health Innovation Nexus. So we've made so many new friends and partners and colleagues over the last 4 years, we needed to bring them into a community, one that would allow us to build on the activity that we've already started and expand through the unknowns of the sector in the coming years. Our focus remains on supporting industry partners, but we've now created more space for homegrown innovation to flourish as well. So the success that we found in supporting SME partners has encouraged innovation and knowledge exchange in other areas of the university that I didn't expect. We've always been innovative in our teaching, but that's really reached new levels in the last couple of years. More and more staff are engaging in consultancy with large pharma, and we're establishing a course in health tech innovation. But the biggest difference that we've seen has been in how we as a team, and I myself, are being viewed by senior leadership. We're included in conversations that we wouldn't have been previously, and more importantly, we're trusted with partnerships that would have previously been kept private. So I guess the message that I want you to take away from this tale is that in smaller specialist organizations, we're often stuck in the trap of trying to do everything but not doing anything very well. We're really strapped for resource, particularly personnel. And what I've found, and what I hope I've shown you today, is that St. George's is that if you focus on one thing that you're really good at, that success catalyzes success in other areas. So this story feels like it's been decades long for me, at least. But in reality, it's actually only been a few short years in the history of an incredible organization. And what's exciting and actually quite sad is the prospect of what's to come as we are merging with City University of London at the end of July. So like all good stories, I'm going to leave you on that cliffhanger. And that's where I'll end. Thank you.
Thanks, Amber. I think you've set us up nicely for part 2 next year. And now over to Christina from Edge Hill.
I have no idea how I'm going to follow that, so you'll just have to bear with me while I get my place. Quick question. Who's heard of Edge Hill University? Oh, fantastic. Who knows where it is? Brilliant, that sounds about right. So we're actually based on the outskirts of Liverpool. Excuse the croaky voice. Karaoke the second night of conference is a bad idea, particularly when you're presenting afterwards. So Edge Hill University is very, very new to the journey of knowledge exchange. Earlier on this year, we did a lot of brand work around who we are as a university and what people think of us. And no surprise, based on the photo that I showed you on the first page, we are seen as friendly, welcoming, pretty. We're a campus-based institution out in the grassy fields of Ormskirk, which again, if you know where it is, I'm impressed because I didn't when I started there. And it's known as being a very modern university, but with a very long history. If you ever encounter my Vice-Chancellor, who is the longest-serving Vice-Chancellor in the UK, at any meeting, he will tell you the origin story of Edge Hill, and it's one of those fantastic stories that we love to tell. So, as an institution, Edge Hill's relatively new. As a university, it's relatively new in terms of its research portfolio. We do things well, but we are very, very student and teaching focused. So last year, in March, much for my sins, I was recruited to Edge Hill University from the University of Wolverhampton to start their very first knowledge exchange office and to start to prioritize knowledge exchange alongside research to see what we could do as an institution. And it was largely, no surprise to anybody in the room, focused on how do we improve our KEF metrics, how do we increase our HIFE allocation, how do we raise the profile of what we're already doing. So not really a big surprise for us is we didn't really have a lot of areas of expertise. And it wasn't because we didn't have the knowledge, we didn't have the staff involved. It was because staff didn't know what knowledge exchange was. They didn't know what the metrics were. They didn't know what they had to do to make sure it was counted. 9 times out of 10, they didn't have a contract in place. We spent an awful lot of time our first 6 months doing a lot of myth busting, particularly around public and community engagement, I'll say, and around the metrics. What could count? So as an institution, we had lots of knowledge exchange activity going on, but nobody knew about it. We didn't tell anybody externally about the good work we were doing, and we never charged for it. We gave everything away for free because we were that lovely. We had a limited understanding of knowledge exchange within the institution. There were no processes, no systems, no support network, nothing for practitioners who wanted to get involved in it. If you went out to the business and community within our local area, they'd go, oh yeah, Edge Hill, know them for students. They wouldn't have a clue about any of our research opportunities or what we did. All relationships across the university were individual to individual, which is great and works wonders, but they weren't institution to institution. It sounds like I'm really slamming Edge Hill here, but we have improved, I promise. We work predominantly with the public sector. There was no income attached to SME engagement across the university in our HEBC return for 4 years. Okay? And we had a low engagement in the regional agenda, whether that be skills development, whether that be regional engagement. Ormskirk sits as part of West Lancashire, which is great, but it also sits right next to Liverpool City region and sits next to Greater Manchester as well. So we have 3 combined authorities in essence that we have to work with, and we weren't doing any of it. So they brought me in. And the first question was, well, where in the heck do I start with this? How do we start to take a bite of the elephant that is knowledge exchange in this institution? So the first questions we asked is, what do we want our staff to be when it comes to knowledge exchange? What do our community need from us? And what systems are we going to have to put into place to make sure we can do this effectively and efficiently? So my Bible at the moment is my 3 Ps, which is people, processes, and presence. And everything that we've done over the last year, since March 2023, has been aligned to one of those cornerstones to ensure that we have the systems in place, the people in place who are supported, and also that we have a voice within the external marketplace. So, people, the most important bit, because if you don't get the people right, you don't get anything else right. So the first thing that we did was to do a series of roadshows to improve the knowledge and understanding of the academic staff and support services about what knowledge exchange was, the good work they were already doing, and what we could do more of, and what we wanted them to do more of. And that was around getting people to understand why our priorities for certain activities were there, what that was going to drive, and how that would drive investment back into the university. We did a series of myth-busting roadshows, and I won't quote some of the questions we got asked, but fascinating world to see how many activities have been going on at the university in some very strange fields. We launched a training and development program that was for all staff, professional services included, that took things right back to basics. So we started off with financial literacy. What is the financial operating model of a university? Where do all the funds come from? What's a pricing and costing model? What do we mean when we talk about surplus? What do we mean when we talk about overheads? And we went right back to basics. We ran a series of collaboration cake workshops, teaching our colleagues how to harness their best practice in building relationships and collaborations with other institutions. Because we're a small institution, we rarely can go alone. And then we ran a number of very, very, very dull sessions that I ran for all of our managers, talking about knowledge exchange metrics and the way we're measured within the system and the sector, so that they could understand why we wanted them to prioritize the areas we did. We do an annual conference every year. We do bespoke training and development for individual departments at away days, research sessions, including our CPD ideas generator, because for a lot of our SHAPE colleagues, that's the first place they start. And we've trained over 450 staff over the past 12 months across these activities. We also launched an internal newsletter, which is an opt-in newsletter. I do not like all staff emails, where staff who are interested to know more about what's going on, what their colleagues are doing, and what their expertise is, can effectively get a monthly newsletter, keeping them up to date with what's going on in the external world, as well as what we're doing internally. It also helps for getting people to understand the processes they should follow. We launched, we amended and then launched. So we had a knowledge exchange, equivalent of knowledge exchange fellow in our promotion round, sitting at Reader. And it was a senior engagement fellow job description. It was very focused on public and community engagement. So we revitalized that and made that our proper knowledge exchange fellow. And that one has gone from having no targets, no outputs, no specific objectives linked to it, to now having very clear deliverables that those individuals are expected to achieve before promotion and while in role. We put a new structure in place across the university that enabled us to have champions within each department and then associate deans at faculty level with responsibility and understanding for knowledge exchange. And we mentor them through that process so that they're upskilling as they go. And then finally, the hearts and minds piece, which was really around how we acted as a team. So when I started at the university, it was very apparent that there was lots and lots of activity going on, but there was very much an attitude of computer says no. And a lot of the colleagues were coming to us and saying, well, why should I engage with you? You're just going to tell me I can't do it. I'm going to have mountains of paperwork to do. You're going to drown me in bureaucracy. So all the processes and systems that we put in place had to make sure that we lessened the burden for our academic colleagues to engage in this work. We made it as quick, as simple, and as efficient and effective as possible for them, but that we were also seen as cheerleaders. That if somebody came to us with a completely whack-a-mamie idea, we were not the first people to say no. That we worked through it with them, even if the end result was no, they understood why. And then we embedded it. So this is my favorite little slide, and it is copyrighted. And this is how we got through to a lot of our colleagues. Edge Hill was still relatively new on the research journey. And as part of that, what we did is wanted to make sure that everything we were doing with knowledge exchange was research embedded, was research or expertise led, that we weren't looking, and you'll excuse my parlance for this, we weren't looking to deliver minute taking for monkeys. That's not where we were going with our direction. We wanted that higher level university expertise. So we've built our knowledge exchange activities within the normal research and academic life cycle to explain to staff where they should fit in within their activities. Processes and systems, which is the dull bit, so I won't be that long on it. First thing we did was implement a pricing and costing model and then train people on how to use it. Very, very straightforward. We took the simplest approach we possibly could in terms of overheads, in terms of surplus, and we didn't set minimums and maximums. We do for, obviously, a minimum overhead, we have to do that. But when it came to surplus, it was about what would the market take and how could we advise them and what was the strategic importance of the work they were doing. So if it was a loss leader, not a problem. But we needed them to understand that it was a loss leader for a reason. We put in due diligence, governance, and approvals processes. We borrowed the research system, Pure, if anybody has it, and ran all our approvals through there. So just the same with a large research bid going through, all of our KE activity gets loaded up there and approved through the same process. It meant we didn't have to train staff in a new system. We took over all of the metrics, much for my sins. I now have to submit them all. And we ran an internal audit to see where we were sitting performance-wise in terms of what records we actually had. We developed new standardized contracts and new quotation templates. We can now turn around a quote from an initial industry contact in 24 hours. Literally from initial contact right through. Most of the time, I'm not gonna lie, it doesn't happen because it takes a bit of time for people to answer their emails. But generally speaking, if an academic comes to us and says, I've been working with this partner for a while, they want to do this bit of consultancy, we can turn that quote around in 2 hours. They can have it that day if they've got the information they need. We took ownership of all of the finances, so it all sits in my cost side. I look lovely. I've got lots of money in that bank account, because it meant that the faculty colleagues that dealt with finances were not going to have to be overburdened by doing all the invoicing. We took over all of that work. And then finally, we implemented a CRM system, primarily within our team to start off with, but then we're rolling it out across the university now to selected users. Again, we've not passed on that administrative burden to our academic colleagues. What we're doing is working with our department administrators so we can start to harness the relationships that they already hold without running into the conflict of, well, you can't have that, it's mine, I'm not sharing, which always happens in universities. And that's the process at the moment. And then we've implemented what's called a strategic partnership agreement system. So we have high-level strategic partners that are at university level. We have faculty strategic partners, and we have departmental strategic partners. And depending on what an organization does with us or how many activities they do with us, depends on where they sit on that totem pole and who is their account manager. And as the KE team, we manage all of that process to make sure that all our staff always know where they can go if they need advice or help, but also to make sure that if our industry clients at any point lose contact with the academic they're working with, or there's a change of staff, the university owns that relationship and has enough of a contact to be able to maintain it. And that's the structure. I will provocate this with, we are a very small team. There are 2 of us, and we've done all this in 15 months. So we are a very small team. We will be growing shortly, but we've had to leverage an awful lot of relationships that we have across the university. We've had to work with our finance colleagues. We've had to work with faculty colleagues. We've had to work closely with leadership and management to make sure that the systems we put in place can be effectively managed and efficient with 2 people, just in case everything else falls down. And then our final piece is around our presence. No surprise that we didn't really tell anybody about what we did. We didn't really have a structure around that. So earlier on this year, in fact about a month and a half ago, we launched our KE strategy, which will take us to 2029, and that will align with the REF cycle. And in that, we have 3 cornerstones of activity. We have people, place, and productivity. So everything we do should be able to fit towards one of those activities and making a difference. We then have 6 strategic themes that are so broad they could cover everything. And that's very, very deliberate on our part because we have lots of little activities going on, lots of small contracts, lots of little partners that we work with. And we needed to be able to group them together to create critical mass and to start build some of that interdisciplinary working across the university. So those themes are broad for that reason. We set up a website. We set up a LinkedIn page, which is not very well managed at the moment. Moving forwards, we have a brochure of case studies that we've developed over the past year of the things we've just done in the past year. You see the front page of the website again there. And I'm very lucky because Edge Hill's motto is in knowledge, there is opportunity. So it wrote my tagline for me. I didn't have to do any marketing with it whatsoever. And then these are the categories that we look to promote. So these are our priority areas in terms of the type of activities we engage with. So developing people, engaging our experts, accessing our students and graduates, our funded programs for SMEs, the scale-up programs that we run, and then our facilities and equipment hire, which the university's traditionally not done. And these are some of our lovely little clients. You can't read it from here, which is very helpful. But this is some of the feedback we've had from our clients over the past year with the change in systems and what's been happening with us. So the difference it's making to our external clients as being recognised and felt, not just internally, but in terms of the fact that they know they can call on us at any time, and we can turn things around, and we can be efficient and effective. And as we all know in universities, that's usually quite a rarity. So it's quite a measure of success. So what's next for us? This is my to-do list for next year. Effectively, we're building a formal progression and promotion route for KE. So we've expanded the research progression route for academics to include KE objectives within it. And we've enabled the workload model that we use, the workload allocation model, to have KE assigned as part of research. So if you are not active at the research stage in your cycle, you can be active in the KE side and you still keep your 40%. You can just do it in a different way. We've issued sample objectives and targets for line managers to use in their PDRs. So this is effectively the world's biggest matrix, it seems, where it has grade at one side, percentage of time across the other, and then there is a whole range of different objectives that academic staff can pick from and amend to say, I really want to do more consultancy this year. What are the consultancy measures? What are the metrics that I can use to evidence what I've done? To then have those conversations with their line managers and have the time allocated in their workload to do that work. We're expanding our learning and development platform with digital resources. So I think September is going to be spent sitting in front of a camera, trying to record as much of the content in my brain as I possibly can. And we're also digitizing an awful lot of our resources in terms of contact forms and ensuring that there's an easy funnel into our CRM system for all of the activities we do. In terms of presence, we're working on developing a regional engagement strategy with our regional partners and linking that in with our strategic partnership agreements and the anchor institutions and organizations we work with most. We're knowledge mapping, and this is a whizzo little project. One of my university researchers is doing a knowledge mapping project around scraping data from all of our different CRM systems across the university, which will then, using AI, map it into a node model. I don't know if anybody's seen a node model with those little graphs. And it will enable us to see how big the relationships are, how many activities individuals engage with us, how many are individual to individual relationships, how many are across the university, how long they run for, how long they've worked with us, across the whole thing without us having to manually do it, which would take years. So I'm really looking forward to hopefully next year bringing that back and you can see exactly what that knowledge mapping project has been done. And then we're developing a public and community engagement strategy and the associated resource plan to tick off the final bit of the KEF metrics and move them forwards, as it's an area we've been predominantly quite strong at the university, but hopeless at doing our own self-assessment for. So hopefully in 2026, we'll see that increase. And then in terms of processes, we've launched our KE strategy this year. We've got an incentivization policy at the university that I wrote in my first month. It doesn't work. It's hopeless. We set up discretionary accounts. A proportion of the surplus went into it for academics. Nobody's asked to use it apart from one. It's a pain to manage financially, and it hasn't meant we've done more work. So the aim this summer is to scrap that policy and turn it into something that's actually going to benefit the teams that are doing the work, whatever that looks like. We're going to expand the CRM across the university. And then over summer, as part of the regional innovation funding that we received, we are developing an evaluation process and an evaluation methodology for all of our KE work, from little £2,000 consultancy projects right up to the multi-million-pound projects that are regional engagement. That's a challenge, I'm not going to lie. But we want something that will enable us to really capture the impact that all of this knowledge exchange work does, and also looks at the relationship part of it, so that it's not just the income metrics we're using, but we're actually looking at what we contribute to society and how that feedback goes. And then finally, just to end on a nice note, one of my mentors a few years ago used to use the phrase, do best what matters most. And I realize it doesn't sound like we've done that, because we've done quite a lot. I'm quite proud of this. But the aim is to get to 10 million in income for KE by 2029. We're currently sitting at 2. So to achieve an extraordinary result, we have had to choose what matters most and give it all the time it demands. So it does mean we do say no, but we do need to make sure that the staff that we can't work with for the project reasons have alternative ways to go and places to do. So there we go. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Can I invite each of our speakers to grab a chair and take a place on the stage? I think, like me, we'll all have resonated with different bits and pieces that came across through all of the presentations, no matter what size of your university is. I didn't introduce myself at the beginning, I kind of forgot about that. I'm Yvonne Kinnear from the University of Strathclyde in Glasgow, and although we're actually a much bigger technical engineering university, then I think there's lots of things we can learn from our colleagues in different areas. So I would like to open the floor for questions. We've got a roving mic at the back as well, so questions? Let's go first. Oh.
Thank you. I'm Jo Bailey from the Royal Vet College, so another small specialist. You mentioned, particularly Christina, you mentioned discretionary accounts and that hasn't worked. And I'm really interested to kind of understand what your next steps might be. You mentioned that you're going down a different route, but do you have a plan as to what that might be yet?
Yeah, at the moment I'm sort of debating between I've been looking at various incentivisation policies across universities. And part of the challenge we have at Edge Hill is we're a bit weird with our financial model. We don't have devolved budgets. We don't have a devolved pay scale. So although departments get a budget to spend, it's not actually money. It's not actually in their account. Everything's done out of central university pot. So when you're trying to get departments to free people up workload-wise to do this work, they're like, well, where's the money going? Like, well, it's going into the big pot at the top where everything goes. Well, what are you doing with the surplus then? Can I have it back? Well, no, because it's all part and parcel of the university. But because it's direct income for them, they don't get the connection. So this current incentivisation policy says, well, you can have 40% of the surplus. But the type of objective projects we're doing, they're so small fry. You've got departments going, well, I've got £630 in that budget and I want to spend it on this. And it's just complicated. So one of the, whether my VC likes this or not, but one of the ideas is that we scrap the whole thing and we just give departments the lot. We don't take the costs out, we don't take the surplus out, we don't take the overheads out. We just give them the lot to reinvest because we're not talking about millions. And in all honesty, the university, we're in a very financially secure position as a university. We're very lucky in that sense. But if we're going to get them to do this work, we need to make sure that departments can then buy in new resources and see the difference that engaging in the activity makes. I don't think I'm going to win that battle. I think we'll end up with a 50-50 split, but I'll go in asking for the 100% first. Yeah.
Any other questions? Your hand up.
Hi, first of all, just thank you. You weren't wrong. Those were three brilliant, oh, sorry, I'm Sasha from Research England. The three brilliant presentations, I really enjoyed them all. Question for Christine, and as I'm from Research England, I think I know the answer to this. What instigated the change, especially when you've had, it's not like you had a new VC come in. What made them suddenly care about KE?
My former director, actually, I'll put this down to a person. So my former director, Jo Crotty, who's now PVC for Research and Global Engagement at Sunderland, basically saw a hole. She saw that nobody was really engaging with KEF in the development phases from Edge Hill. She was involved in the Institute for Social Responsibility at that point, and her area of research is all around engaging with communities and working with communities and so forth. So she saw it as an opportunity for career promotion, for progression. She'd be quite honest about that. She went, I want that job, right, this is what I'm going to do. So she lobbied really, really hard. And luckily for her, and luckily for the structure, we have a Pro-Vice-Chancellor who's was research, is now research and knowledge exchange due to the creation of the office. And he saw the value. And he saw that this was an area that we really needed to work on in the university and build. So even though there wasn't a change in VC or a change in management, the KEF brought it to light. There were changes with how we were reporting things. There wasn't really ownership of a lot of the data returns that we were going through. And they both saw that there was a hole there that needed to be filled. And it was purely luck on that sense. That going forwards, it was down to the individuals fighting for the remit and go forwards.
Thank you. Anyone else? Questions? Yeah.
Hi, I'm Maggie from Edinburgh Napier. It's perhaps more for Adnan specifically about the mapping exercise. So two things. I guess, will this continue to be done for every new member of academic staff that comes into the business school and other schools? And then secondly, how do you manage expectations? We've got quite a small team, and if I met with all the academics across the 2 schools I support and created this, you know, what's your ideas, what solutions are you fixing, I think they would expect me to provide some sort of service for them, which I couldn't do across the 2 schools. I just wonder how you manage that.
So the mapping process will go through an annual review. All maps will be reviewed again, and they've got a copy of that so that they can update it themselves. And with every new person that comes on board, they go through that interview with me, and we kind of pin down what it is that they're doing and where they'd like to be, and how that then maps onto their own professional development. So that was your first point. I've got memory, cognitive impairment, so could you repeat your second?
So the second one was just about managing expectations.
In what respect?
In terms of, so I was thinking if I met with every academic across the schools I support and gave them this hour and was like, oh, what do you want to do and what's your solution and what societal solution, they'd expect something then to follow up, and I couldn't do that for about 350 academics.
It's about empowering the academic. It's about putting that responsibility on them in kind of paving the pathway and saying the support's available and I can signpost you to the resources across the university. It's that education piece of you know, KEF is here to stay and this is where you need to go when you're at that stage. And then when you get to another stage, let's move on and kind of work from there, which makes it kind of a bit more feasible then. And also just to note that there are 2 universities currently we're in talks with, because we're going to package this and commercialize it once the interface is developed, and so that will be rolled out across as a pilot across 2 other universities.
Any other questions? 2.
Thank you. Natalie Muller from Cambridge Enterprise. I was interested for St. George's. You mentioned SME innovation vouchers. Can you tell me a bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. So it's not really a novel concept that we invented, but it's essentially a small pot of funding. So the way that we run it, it's up to £5,000 worth of our academics' time or access to facilities. So the money doesn't actually go out, it's sort of in-kind support for the company. And it works as a bit of a try before you buy kind of process for these companies. So they might come and say, actually, we've got a specific problem that we need to solve, and we would like your support in doing that. So we will match them to an academic or clinical partner, and we will fund for them some of that time, which is incredibly valuable to them. And it's a short project. What we really look for is that there's potential for long-term partnership. So most of the time that's in the form of a KTP application or something similar to that. But it's really, I mean, it's very easy to manage because there's no money going out. It's all internal. We're just shifting the HIFE budget over to one of the departments. And it's been really, really successful. We run networking events to match partners with match SMEs with academics and clinicians. It's really great.
And there was another question just there.
It's a question for Christina. You mentioned about the process and procedure and the structure. I'm just wondering, when you launch all those wonderful things, I mean, have you come across any barriers, and how do you influence and persuade the stakeholders? Thank you.
We haven't actually hit any barriers on that side of things. I'm slightly referred to around the university as a bit of a steamroller sometimes. So if I want to put a process in place, get out of my way. Because what we did is basically harness best practice, particularly when we talked about the quotes and the contracts. It was to take best practice from the sector and say, right, how do we do this in the most efficient way for a client, but also make it so that, like you say, academic colleagues aren't having to faff about with paperwork. So we were basically saying to them, you bring us the projects, you bring us the ideas, we'll cost it, we'll do your contract, we'll do your quote, we'll get it to the client, we'll get it signed, we'll get it approved, and then you get on and do the work. How's that? And so the processes all sit around the idea of making it easier for our stakeholders. So we actually haven't had any issues or barriers or any computer says no yet.
Any other questions in the room? Just, oh.
One at the front here.
Hi, Lachlan Wilson from the University of Melbourne in Australia. Question for St George's, just how do you get KE on the strategy?
Yeah, KEF definitely helped. Cake and Called Out and KEF definitely helped. And then I think the new strategy came sort of two years into my time at George's, and I'd really focused on building those internal relationships, making sure that I was being seen, I was being heard, we presented at the board, all of those sorts of things. But one of the biggest challenges that I had was actually upskilling my director, and I know he won't be upset for me saying this, but he's from a research finance contracts background. He really didn't have much of an idea about KE. And so making sure that he understood what we were trying to do so that then he could pass on that message. And it was teaching my director, teaching the Vice-Chancellor, the Deputy Vice-Chancellor, it was really just making sure that that message was going out. And then, I mean, it was, the first draft came out and KE was just stuck as a line under research. And I wrote straight back and said, hang on a second, don't you think it would be a really good idea if we made it a separate thing? So yeah, it was a lot of lobbying and yeah. But being there in the right place at the right time in terms of KEF and the called out definitely helped.
Any other questions in the room just now? So I'd just like to finish by, first of all, thanking our three panellists today. I hope you agree it was a really good session. And to ask each of them just for a kind of either a top tip or a top challenge, even if it's be a steamroller. I quite like that one. But just something that you've really learned from your experience, either just being here today, sharing with colleagues, or something from your own experience of what you presented. So just one challenge or small top tip or something you've done differently. You can go in whatever order you want.
I mean, going back to what I was saying in my talk, I think for me it's about trying to identify what you're good at and then just running with that, because we can't do everything, particularly when you're a small team. And if you do try and do everything, you just fall flat on your face. And I've sorry, Christine, but you haven't. But it's very easy to do that. And really, if you just focus on one thing and you just keep talking about it and talking about it and talking about it, eventually the message gets through, and you're good at it. And that really just creates momentum, and it just works. It just happens. So.
For me, I would say invest in your people and really take on a relational approach. Show them that you care and that they matter, because that will reap rewards. Yeah, you can't afford not to, especially in a commercial world where you're undermining the integrity of their research, or because you're just trying to commercialize it, especially when it's social science. Yeah, invest in your people.
So I'm going to be awkward and have to, because why not? I totally agree with what you're saying on that. Pick a path. For your institution, for your team, whatever it might be, pick an approach that is who you are. There's always a disconnect where I think with university sometimes we try and be something we're not. So if you want to be, focused on shape, you want to be social, you want to deal with sort of community and public engagement side of things, do that and do it really, really well. And don't worry about the rest of the stuff. We get pulled from pillar to post with metrics a lot of the time, saying you have to do everything for everyone. We don't. Be that specialist, like you say, focus on what you want to do. And then on a personal front, it's purely steal everybody else's best practice. We have a phenomenal amount of knowledge within our sector, not just within the knowledge exchange area, but within research colleagues, within finance colleagues. Go out there and meet as many people from as many institutions as possible. Share your knowledge openly, steal theirs, swap policies, get involved in the community of practice on Praxis if that's the way you do it. Do a roadshow, which is what we've done recently. Go and visit other universities and steal their marketing material and merch and go, oh, I want a cup like that, we'll have those. And do all of those things, because we've got an amazing sector and we keep reinventing the wheel and we don't have to. We're all there to help each other, so use that network. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Just if we give them our panel a round of applause. This session's now finished. We've finished a little bit early, so if you're heading home, you can head home a bit early now, or you've got another extra 10 minutes before the next session starts. So thank you very much.